This is just a matter of passively like playing to their incentives. It's better for their bottom line if nobody has that food than if somebody got that food for free. Because if somebody got that food for free, that's that much more food that they wouldn't need to buy next time. The other thing that I wanted to highlight, or the other thing that another thing that I wanted to talk about, was one of the examples of capitalism by virtue of the profit incentive, creating environments of mass suffering, right? On Blue Sky, there was a post this morning that I saw where, somebody had posted a picture of a field of apples, field full of apples just laying there. And they said, this is where, this is where apples go when they can't be sold, when farms produce apples and whatever, they take them to market, in the grocery store, wherever. They can't sell all of them, not always. So what do they do with the remaining apples? They put them in a giant field and they let them rot. That's it. And I saw that and was reminded of how the food industry at large operates, because it's not just apples. When grocery stores or restaurants can't sell the food that they have, if they still have stuff stocking the store shelves, they don't they don't donate it, they don't give it to somebody, they don't sometimes they do mark it down if it's like, oh yeah, this food is we kind of need to get it off the shelf so we can stock something more fresh. I've actually bought food. I've taken advantage of them marking down food that's been there for a little while. But for a lot of the food, if they can't sell it, they just throw it away. Perfectly good food, but nobody bought it. Maybe they couldn't afford to, maybe whatever it was. And it is massively wasteful. And the reason that companies do that, the reason that grocery stores and restaurants do that, is because it would be better for their bottom line. This is just a matter of passively playing to their incentives. It's better for their bottom line if nobody has that food than if somebody got that food for free. Because if somebody got that food for free, that's that much more food that they wouldn't need to buy next time. Does that make sense? In fact, there are some personal horror stories. That image on Blue Sky being one of them, but some experience from my dad and I believe a friend of mine in college being some other ones. My dad used to work at a fast food restaurant when he was in high school. Pretty common thing for a lot of people when they're teenagers in America. It's like, oh yeah, you work at a fast food place and whatever else, right? And this fast food place would have, extra food at the end of the day that they wouldn't be able to sell. Still good. It's not like, the food that gets thrown out, it's not like rotting as they're throwing it out. It's still good food. You can still eat it. And one of the policies at the fast food place that my dad worked at was, yeah, you're not allowed to have the food that we're going to throw out because it's ours. You can't have it. It's like, fucking what? You're going to throw it out. That means you're forfeiting the food, right? This is a standard practice in the food industry, and it leads to billions of tons of food waste. It would be so hard for me to not call them a demon as a joke. Oh, you don't even need to joke. This is demonic behavior, deserving of the Antichrist or some shit like that. And to add on top of this, this common practice in the pandemic, food insecurity hit like a fucking truck. Food insecurity increased during the pandemic to all-time highs. And people started to figure out that grocery stores and restaurants were throwing away perfectly good food that they could just take home, maybe clean off the plastic that it was wrapped in. This food hadn't even been touched or unpacked in any form. It was still, perfectly good in storefront conditions. You could take that stuff home and eat it. You could make dinner out of it. So what a lot of really poor or vulnerable or sometimes homeless people started doing was they started dumpster diving. Usually the cartoon image of dumpster diving is you find a half-eaten banana or sandwich or whatever, and you're like, oh, sweet. But no, you can find perfectly good, still packaged food in the dumpster sometimes. And so people started doing that a lot because grocery stores were not. I think that it was something like the sales on grocery store food started to decrease. And in response to this, there was like a very vigorous conversation that was sparked about, oh shit, people are clearly suffering and having to go to the dumpster to find food. And like, what's this? There's some perfectly good food in the dumpster. Why is that not going to the food bank or something, right? You would assume, if we were in a sane world, that this would prompt some kind of discussion at the government level about, in improving the efficiency of food distribution systems and stuff like that, so that people who need food can get food, and so that like people don't have to fucking dumpster dive. But as you may have noticed by the premise, I said if we were in a sane world. And we are not in a sane world, we're in a capitalist world. So what happened was a lot of local governments, cities, towns, counties, started actually calling up the police and posting them outside of the dumpsters. There were cops in the pandemic that were guarding the dumpsters of thrown out food that was still perfectly good, still packaged, safe to eat, guarding the dumpsters outside of grocery stores and restaurants from people who were hungry and needed something to eat and were going dumpster diving as a result. Dumpster diving isn't even illegal, mind you. It is not illegal to go and pick through the dumpster and take something out. It's gross and unhygienic, but it is not illegal to reach into the trash can and pick something up out of the trash can. That's not against the law. They had the police posted at the dumpsters, the garbage bins, to enforce a law that doesn't exist. Because the law is a fucking illusion in liberal democracy. There's a meme about, like, the law in its majestic equality forbids rich and poor alike from behaviors that only poor people exclusively engage in. But in this case, it's not even the law doing that. The state took the initiative to use the mechanisms of law enforcement to prevent people from doing something that was completely legal. Specifically because if people figured out that there was a reliable or even semi-reliable way to get safe to consume food from the dumpster that could rival, like, grocery shopping in its efficacy, because you're getting free food and not having to sacrifice as much of quality as the cartoons might have you believe, then that puts the grocery stores under additional scrutiny, and it sort of threatens their ability to make quarterly profits and to make those growth targets. So, as a result, the government, acting quickly to safeguard the interests of private capital against the hungry masses, had the police heroically guard the dumpsters from, hungry dumpster divers. Great job. With your help, you've ensured that society will starve for several more months. Nice. I don't understand why the government can make laws, can't make laws to make it so companies have to offer their old food to charities before throwing it out. That is a law that the government could just make. They can do that. They simply choose not to. Because the liberal institutions of government, the priority of them is not to ensure the prosperity and well-being of society. Rather, it is to suppress the contradictions of capital and labor for as long as possible, to basically let the capital class have their cake and eat it too. The government is like the enforcer of the capital class. They just chose not to. And of course, that would be a difficult law to enforce. In concept, obviously, it's a good idea. In some ways, it might be difficult to enforce. But again, such a law would actually step on the toes of private capital. So no law would ever get passed. I gained VR. I don't know why I'm on the same vehicle. Why didn't the rich people make it illegal? Well, they didn't need to. All they had to do all the county had to do was refer to some nebulous ordinance that may or may not have made it illegal already, and post the police there anyway. You may notice the police crack down on plenty of shit that's not illegal. For example, sleeping in your own home, or walking on the sidewalk at night. They choose to enforce these selectively, these non-laws. But understand that the police are the law. The law is simply that which you will be punished for engaging in. And the police and the state can punish you for doing literally anything at any time if they decide that you are deserving of that. Yeah, if you are poor, you don't have legal rights in the United States. It is one of the most recognizable critiques of liberalism that the poor are an outgroup that the law binds but does not protect, and the rich people are an in-group that the law protects but does not bind. You know? Capitalism increasingly, this is a capitalism thing because this is all contingent on the interests of private capital sowing suffering in the masses and needing to be defended from an increasingly angry and hungry mass of people. Capitalism becomes increasingly lawless, where laws designed by people of good faith at times, laws are meant to, in a way, promote the common good. But the common good often contravenes the interests of private capital. So some laws will have to be disregarded, and some things will have to be enforced where there is no law dictating that there be enforcement of that, you know? Such as, like dumpster diving. Not illegal in plenty of places, but it was still enforced in plenty of places as though it was illegal. What's up, Big V? Yeah, Lady Justice is only blind to the poor. Lady Justice is very capable of discerning who is poor and who is rich, you know? And again, this is not just a United States thing. The problem may not be as bad in countries in Europe, but I ask you, when was the last time that a billionaire or the shareholders of a large company faced any meaningful legal consequence for malfeasance and wrongdoing? When was the last time that a billionaire exploited child labor in the developing world, or mass exploited, the workers, fucking stole wages, or any shit like that, or embezzled money from public services and whatever, and actually went to prison for a long time for it? I guarantee most people would not be able to answer that because there hasn't really been an appreciable number of instances of that happening. The exception proves the rule. If you can find an instance of that happening, congratulations, that's one. Unfortunately, this is partly where I also succumb to the neoliberal brain rot of capitalist realism, because it's hard for me to imagine. I've grown up under this system my whole life. The only system that I have ever seen or directly been exposed to in the course of my life is late stage capitalism, with all of its inglorious flaws and inanities and inhumanities. Bars. It's hard for me to imagine a world that's different because I've never seen it, But a different world, a better world, where food is not distributed on the basis of private capital profit every 3 months is possible. There are better food distribution systems out there. We have the technology and the supply chains to make it happen. We just need to, there's just a desperate need to change the relations of power and property to make it more feasible for that stuff to happen. Yeah, we're trapped in the domain of liberalism. Oh yeah, liberals also, yeah, Gotron, what you're referring to, liberals a lot of times, and it's not just a liberal thing, a lot of people do this, engage in what's called the just world fallacy. A lot of people don't want to believe that the world is so fucked up that a billionaire could just, like, I don't know, casually be the head of a company and with all the shareholders, like, engage with child slavery in sub-Saharan Africa, or even, you know, believe that there is slavery in sub-Saharan Africa, so they'll just deny it. You know, it's much easier to deny, especially when you're not frequently confronted with it straightforwardly, that something bad is happening, than it is to confront the potential wide-ranging implications of that bad thing. You know? Like, we learn in school that slavery was abolished in 1865. I gotta break it to you guys. It wasn't actually abolished. Slavery still exists as permitted by the U.S. Constitution as punishment for a crime. If you like, fucking, Slomo XD, welcome back to chat. If you steal a toothbrush from a convenience store, the state can just make you a slave. That's part of the 13th Amendment. And, in fact, that's only slavery as it is literally recognized by name in the law. It's also entirely possible and commonplace for companies to employ sweatshop labor or slave labor in the third world, or sometimes even in the United States, where people are paid wages so low that it is basically comparable to an eternal state of servitude. You know, that, like, they are so impoverished by the demand of their employer that they have no hope of ever escaping from it. I ask you, in what way is that different meaningfully than slavery? You know? That's one of the main component parts, one of the main features of modern capitalism, is that trying to lower the labor costs of any industrial operation or anything like that, basically to the point of slavery. That is the cheapest possible level at which industry can operate, when you are literally not paying workers anything, when you have slave labor. Capitalism is a race down to that point. The capitalists would say that situation, they made the choice to be a slave. Not exactly. Yeah, that is most frequently the argument. If anybody decides to, in any way, you know, maybe a little bit confront the reality of there being slave labor, the go-to defense is that, well, they chose to take that job. I gotta break it to you, no, they didn't, you know? Even in a place like the United States, the choice was already made for them, de facto, where, it's possible there weren't a whole lot of opportunities in the area. It's possible that the employers have dirt on them, would threaten to rat them out to immigration services or whatever. A lot of sweatshop labor in the United States employs undocumented migrants. And in some more blatant situations, the coercion is a lot harder. It's a lot more blatant. In Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, a lot of times there will be warlords and like company gangs that will control a given area or town, and the gun to the back of people's heads, should they decide to not take a sweatshop job, is a lot less metaphorical than it would be in somewhere like the United States, where we have a lot more comfortable standard of living, comparatively speaking. You know? This thing is not very fast. Heard a great quote a couple of days ago. The amount of rights you give to your prisoners determines how long it takes for a dictatorship to take place. That's a pretty good metric to refer to, yeah. That, you can judge a society in a lot of ways by how it treats prisoners, those who have had their rights taken away, or those who the state has deemed to be criminals. Because in a dictatorship, the bar is not very high to determine who is a criminal and who's not. That's why a lot of times the groundwork of fascist dictatorship is laid before a coup d'etat even happens, right? Like, the extreme far right politician only determines, oh yeah, now there are more things that are illegal and can make you a criminal. Whereas it was already the case, it could have been already the case, that if you're a criminal, you basically had no rights, you know? I despise the fact that society doesn't understand consent in all situations. Well, Yeah, that, that does suck, but it's hard to hold it against people when consent is constantly being manufactured by malicious actors who do very much understand what consent is and how to artificially generate it in the minds of a very large population in order to better realize their draconian aims, People don't really understand what consent is in a societal sense because it has been drilled into them that whatever happens to you is legitimate, you know? That consent has been manufactured. But anyways, all that stemmed from me having seen a post on Blue Sky where somebody said like, yeah, I was driving past this field today. It was a field full of apples, and it was one of those fields where they take the apples that they weren't able to sell and they just toss them there to let them rot, you know? Like, they don't give them away. They don't give them to a charity. They don't send them to a different, means of distribution. If they can't sell food, they just throw it out and prevent anybody from getting it for free. Are you waiting for a whole discussion because of apples? Yeah, it's just one of those, it's if you were a certain genre of shitposter, you could very easily see that and make the meme of like me seeing that picture of a field of apples, because it's just a picture, and then me being like the Joker being like, this says a lot about society, or something like that. But it's true. Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.